Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. I'm looking at a book about the financial system we've been going through in recent years. This has got an interesting title, which is not initially something that possibly you could follow as an absolute fundamental reason for understanding what the content of the book is about. The title being a little bit confusing, however, it all becomes clear very quickly. The title is Regulating Securitized Products, a Post-Crisis Guide. It's been written by Rashid Saluddin. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. My apologies if I haven't. The book's come to us from Palgrave Macmillan. It's a good book, very, very interesting. It's only a small book, we'll look at it in a minute. But it's a very important book because we're looking at the global financial crisis that has occurred. And there have been quite a few books actually available in recent years about the crisis. And this is one of them. And I think it's a very important and actually not that difficult to read book, notwithstanding the title is not the easiest, most helpful title around. But what it talks about is the post-crisis guide to where we are with this area of regulation. Now, Elizabeth and I wrote the review, and we had a talk about the book, get some idea of what we were going to say. And we've given our review title, which should be in the journals and on the web, the following title: A Revealing Post-Mortem on the General Financial Crisis and the Pros and Cons of Regulation. Now, this is where we are at the moment, because the issue is a big one. It's a political one as well as an economic one, if you like, as to how far regulation goes. Of course, being a barrister, we are very, very heavily regulated. The financial sector doesn't want heavy regulation in the same way at all and would like it to be self-imposed effectively. But the question is whether that's going to happen or not, or whether something stronger than that will take place. This is the book. Let's have a look at it. Brick Walls, actually, is the front, and actually the title. There's the spine, and then there's a little bit of information on the back. This is actually a hardback, this book. It's not a big book. There's some detail about the author at the back, and there is a little bit of information, just over 200 pages. There's the index, you can see. At the front, there's nothing on the inside cover, dust cover at all, but we then get to the actual front page, the name of the author, who's West Face Capital Incorporated is who he works from. There's a nice dedication. I always like to mention the dedications. And then you go into the 6 main chapter headings. There is a useful list of figures, and there's a very useful preface to read at the beginning, which sets out what has actually been going on. Then there are some acknowledgements. Then you get into a little bit about the author again, and then there's actually a list of abbreviation, very important in financial sector cases and books, because there's so much abbreviation and it's so easy to get confused. Then you get into the chapter itself. You see, it's not a big book, but it does make a lot of, I think, very important points. For instance, the title, Introduction, Securitization as Villain and Saviour. There we go. And then we run through from there. You will notice that there are no footnotes. There is paragraph numbering, which makes it easy to find things, but there are no footnotes. There are some nice diagrams or figures, whatever you'd like to call them. And you do get a nice logical set of conclusions at the end of the chapters. And then what you do, the way this is actually structured, is the justification, in other words, the footnotes, instead of being at the bottom, they're all at the back. So you will find for each of the chapters, you have to go right to the back of the book to find the actual notes to go with it. In some ways, that makes it easier to read, because it means that you can go through the whole of the book without having to bother with checking and cross-referring to footnotes. You've also got some boxed sections with lessons learned and various examples and so forth. Very interesting, very well thought out, very logically structured book. So what do we say about it? We say this: securitization, as noted in this book, is a tool which takes a number of slightly different forms. To some, it's an important instrument for revitalising credit flows. Others see it basically as a mechanism by which credit risks can be transferred ultimately rendering the global economy less fragile, and that must be in everyone's interests. The latter goal, therefore, is the ultimate aim in view, as I've said, and that is for all of us, of course, not merely those in the financial services industry, because it affects everyone. We have no wish to have, of course, another GFC, that's a global financial crisis of the kind which engulfed the world in 2008. Hence the subtitle of this book, A Post-Crisis Guide. There are a huge number of casualties as a result of that, and we're still feeling some of the knock-on effects of what happened, which is actually 8 years ago now. Time moves on quite quickly. This book then, from Palgrave, sets out to discuss, often in minute detail, the extent to which securitization of financial products should be regulated, and it attempts to answer a number of questions and address a number of concerns pertaining to regulation of financial services in general, as well as the regulation of securitized products in particular. And let's take some examples. How much regulation should there be? How much is too much? And should increased financial regulation be implemented at all? These are interesting questions, and people have different views. If one were to summarise the author's view on these matters, which is no easy task, it would be that the general public, especially those who have suffered most from the effects of the GFC, would favour more regulation, not less, whilst the banks, for example, would take the opposite view, so there are no surprise there whatsoever. It's published by Macmillan Palgrave, as I said, and the book provides a sustained and analytical discussion of the consequences, controversies, arguments and repercussions, both real and possible, intended and unintended, which may be brought about by the regulation of securitized products. And to this end, the author, Rashid Suluddin, has deployed not only his formidable academic credentials, but his 20 years of experience as an industry insider, and we thank him for that, because we do actually like to have the view of a very well considered academic person who's actually got the hands-on practical experience. Currently, Mr. Suluddin is a portfolio manager at one of Canada's largest hedge funds, specialising in investing in global securitized products. He also has a PhD, is on the programme at Cambridge. In fact, I don't think he's got the PhD yet. He probably has got it by the time I record this. But he's actually doing the programme at Cambridge on the subject of regulation during the Great Depression. And he's also doing a master's degree at, respectively, the LSE and at Cambridge in economic history. So he's a busy boy. While the book comments quite extensively on the damage done by the GFC to numerous economies and therefore ultimately to ordinary members of the public. The book itself, as stated by the author, is targeted to a specialist readership. That's understandable from the way it's structured and everything else. It's not a book for novices, but I think it's actually highly readable. It certainly makes an important contribution to the current literature on financial regulation in general, as well as this specialised subject in particular. Setting out an agenda for discussion, it provides ample suggestions for possible solutions to the many GFC-generated problems, most of which have not, unfortunately, gone away. Let me conclude by saying this. Undoubtedly, the book will be of interest to lawyers involved in the financial services industry, and there are a lot of these lurking about the City of London, as well as researchers who will be very pleased to discover the 11-page bibliography and extensive footnoting, which together comprise a valuable source of reference, and you'll find that at the back of the book. Publication date is cited at 2015, and I'm recording this towards the end of 2015. There's the book again, spine and then the back. Not very much information about it there, but you can see a little bit there. Now, just going to the back again, let me just point out the detail, because you've got a subject index, which is quite nice, which is typical actually of academics to a certain extent, but very useful. You've got an author's index, then you've got the bibliography, which I mentioned right at the back, and then before the bibliography you see the bibliography goes on for a long time, so there's a huge amount of work that's gone into this. Then you've got the notes that go with it, and you can see that this is very much aimed as an academic tome. The preface, I think, is very well worth reading, because this man has the author has a tremendous expertise in this area, and we're very grateful to him for sharing that expertise with us. It is, to a certain extent, a little bit like reading a bit of a thesis, which is not to be surprised, because that's probably what this is going to go towards as part of what he's actually studying at the moment. But we are very lucky that he shared this with us, so thank you very much to all concerned for an excellent publication on regulating securitized products. Thank you. Bye-bye.